On Talking Lifestyle, The Daily Drive, brought to you by the 50 Up Club.
Yeah, Nick Bennett, Kayley Harris with you tonight. Have your say to win 10K. Get on the phone tonight, or you can email us, message at talkinglifestyle.com.au to be in that draw with John and Gary early in October. 10 grand. Now, Kayley, that's a reasonable kind of deposit for a home or maybe an apartment. It's a good start anyway.
Yeah, certainly would be a good deposit for a home in Broken Hill, and we'll be talking about that later this hour.
Thanks for quantifying that.
That's okay.
You get, maybe I'm stuck in 30-year ago pricings.
Yeah, I think so. You need more than that now in Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane.
You need $10,000 times by 10, but a good start nonetheless.
Exactly. Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey from Century 21. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
How was your weekend?
I'm very, very depressed.
Why is that, mate?
I lost the club championship. I was the club champion. I am no longer.
Oh, is this your golf?
Yes, I am no longer. I came in second.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, there was a gentleman that got me on the second day. Played a very good game he did, and I didn't play too well. So anyway, as always, another year. It's not like the Olympics. It comes around a bit sooner. So
that's
you're
all
a bit
right.
off this year, Charles.
I don't know what it was. You know, and I went in thinking that I was going to win by an incredible margin. You know how you put yourself under pressure. And, of course, the day before I changed something in my swing and it had a great deal of impact on the first day. And that was where I lost it the first day, not the second. But nonetheless,
Charles,
it was
you've
great.
been in business for 45 years in real estate. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I know. But I'm not there yet. You know, I'm not there with my golf. I'm not there yet.
Fair enough.
So, got to keep fixing.
Now, tonight in the program, we're going to talk about mortgage fraud. This is really interesting. There's apparently $500 billion of liar loans out there, according to the UBS. Tell us about liar loans. What are they?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, there's a significant number of brokers that have been caught in this as well. So, and it's certainly not to say that that's how the industry is, but there's always one or two that go out there and they get known for it. I've known of a few people that have said, we were threatened with our lives if we didn't put the application in. I remember one broker said to me one day, a guy put a gun on my desk and sat in front of me and said, "You need to get this loan through."
Whoa.
That sort of thing does happen, and it's a pretty sad situation. But I think it goes deeper in the sense that some people get pretty desperate about wanting to buy a property, and you can't check everything. You can certainly check a lot more nowadays than we were able to many years ago. So people are getting caught. People are getting caught, and so they should.
So the bank is following up on this survey of mortgage holders, and of 900 people surveyed, around 67% said they had completely given accurate information, which leaves around about 33% who are telling porky pies, stretching the truth, which, it's tempting to do that, isn't it? But it can get you into trouble.
Yeah, I would say that's the case. Also, the number would probably be a lot higher, Nick, out there. Again, as I mentioned earlier, people do want to own a property. Many people do. It's a big thing in Australia, and sometimes they'll say just a few little things that are not that easy to check. And if you look good overall, you've got a reasonable deposit, sometimes it just slips through.
Does it say, putting aside your extreme story of somebody walking into a broker with a gun, are banks too eager to loan money and unwilling at times to properly vet applicants?
Yeah, they were. There was certainly a concern with that. As you go back into the days, that's what happened to the US, where I remember one story where they lent a Mexican fruit picker who was on a salary of $28,000, somewhere in the order of $900,000 to buy 2 townhouses, something along those lines. So there was a lot of that going on because at the other end, at the stock market end, the way in which they were packaging loans and selling them as packaged loans was very attractive. So at the front end, it became easy to lend money. And banks got pretty easy here in Australia. And the one thing that I like about what happened here compared to there is that the guarantees are in place here. If you default on a loan, you are taken all the way.
Yeah.
In the US, what would happen is that people would take off the doors, take out the windows, take out any of the white goods that they could, and they'd just leave. And the banks wouldn't chase them because there was no personal guarantee attached. And that's why you had the banks owning so much property in the US. We don't have that issue in Australia. So we've had a much better opportunity. And when the banks have lent money, it scared people when they were chased. And I think we've had the opportunity to control it a lot more here in Australia.
The banks really leave themselves exposed, don't they, in a downturn when you apparently have $500 million worth of liar loans, $1 billion worth of liar loans out there. Is that really leaving them exposed?
They have left themselves exposed, and I think this is why you're seeing a change again. There was a lot of money lent in the last few years because there was a boom market. Now you're seeing that change coming through where the RBA has stepped in, you look at the banks have stepped in, they've increased the way in which you need to qualify for a loan, they've reduced the number of percentage of people that can buy off the plan from overseas. They've increased the deposit in some suburbs. In some suburbs, they're not even lending. There was a suburb in Western Australia, a couple of suburbs in WA, where certain banks weren't even lending to anybody to buy a home, and this is only just recent.
Yep.
So a lot of this is coming to play because the banks are really protecting themselves. And I think that's a good thing. The one thing that got us through the GFC is that we had, out of the 10 banks in the world that were the strongest, we had 4 out of 10. During the GFC.
When it comes to downturns, later in the show, we'll talk to an expert, Nerida Conisbee, who's the chief economist at REA Group. She's going to examine what will happen if there is a mass property price
Nerida
crash.
knows what she's talking about too.
That's ahead tonight as well, around the grounds to Broken Hill and Merrylands, and also Tom Panos, your mate from Sky Business News, is going to join us later tonight as well.
Mr. Panos, he will.
Yeah.
He'll talk auctions, and I've got to tell you, everybody was saying downplaying auctions. The results are, is it going to change? And my view was that we're still going to get the clearance rates. It's still going to be tough out there. The auctioneer is going to have to work harder, and so too are the agents. And the clearance rates on the weekend across the country was 70.2. As an average. This time last year they were 76.4, so there's not a lot of difference. And Sydney came in at 72.3, while Melbourne came in at 73.2. Canberra was 69.2. They're exceptional clearance rates in a marketplace that everybody's been talking down for quite some time.
Okay, now when we know rents, can be very pricey in parts of Sydney and Melbourne, but the amount paid by some wealthy renters is eye-watering. In Melbourne, for example, there's a handful of ultra-luxury rentals on offer for as much as $4,000 a week. That's around $250,000 a year. Amazingly, they're rarely on the market for long because they're snapped up by 2 willing renters. Who's got that kind of money?
My very good friend, Mr. Chris Gray, who hosts Your Property Empire, on Sky Business, he rents. He buys investment properties, but where he lives, he rents. Now, a property that might fetch $250,000 a year or $200,000 a year, what you're saying there, Kayley, might be worth $8 to $10 million. And if you go and borrow that kind of money, you're going to be paying $350,000 to $400,000 in interest payments. So he rents where he wants to live in magnificent properties, and he buys investment properties elsewhere.
But $4,000 a week is a lot of money.
I know. I know of one person that works in my company that is renting a $5 million penthouse. And I said, how do you justify it? He said, well, it's pretty simple. I've got 2 investment properties, and they pick up most of my cost, although he's got to pay tax on it if he's in the positive. But he's living where he wants to live, but he couldn't afford to buy it.
Yep. All right. There's 2 very good examples. Who else might be renting these places? Maybe wealthy international guests?
Yeah, a lot of the time you'll find that they're rented out to international guests, and they're just generally managed by different companies that, as you would know, people that manage superstars like you.
And what about recently divorced people? Does this happen? People come across a windfall. Not that, be careful how you kind of hedge that one.
I don't want to talk about
put that forward, but let's say someone's come into a fairly large amount of money after a divorce settlement. Would they be interested in a place like this?
Oh, they might want to party for a little while because they've come out the other side of a relationship. Yes. It's a very touchy area, but no, I would think it's probably more in line with people that can afford it because they want to live that lifestyle and they don't want to buy, they don't want the responsibility of owning and upkeeping, because living in a nice home is great. Living in a really massive mansion, to me, I've always seen that as more of an obligation, more of a challenge, more of a situation where I would not relax.
It's a bit of a burden.
I would not relax. Yeah, thanks. I couldn't think of the word.
The more you got, the more you got to look after, right?
Well, I live in a comfortable home, but I'd hate to live in a mansion where I have to look after it and look after different wings. I always say to my friends, people who live in really, really big houses must hate their families.
Yeah, that's classic. And imagine the heating costs. I saw some amazing new mansions, some Mac mansions when I was in Melbourne recently, in Glen Waverley.
Yes.
Absolutely huge places. Like they went the whole block, not very much block left, mostly house. And I thought to myself, wow, just to heat this joint you would be paying thousands annually just on power and gas to heat it.
I have to say, Nick, I think heat and power might be the least of their concerns when you're looking at something so expensive.
Big.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of them would be corporate rents too, wouldn't they? For
very much so.
Business people.
I do know a lot of people that come through my organisation because of the international connection, and they're looking for properties for executives for a year, and they'll pay the rent up front for a year, so they're always good to get.
I always joke that my garage is the West Wing. Where I live.
How are those? No, I won't talk about it. I won't mention the war you're having with those insects at the moment, Kayley.
No.
13 12 83. Charles Tarbey's here tonight, Property Fast Track. He has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to real estate, so if you're considering getting into maybe commercial or resi or out of either of those two, give him a buzz, 13 12 83.
Charles, here's a question for you. Some people might think about putting in a pool or a jacuzzi or converting their roof into a rooftop space or, adding an extra story. But how do you figure out if the add-on extension or whatever it is that you've put in adds more value to the home than it costs to build or install?
I have seen this happen so many times, and if you're going to live there for a long time, go ahead and do it. If you're thinking that it's going to add to the value of your property, I've seen renovations that will add to the value of a property, but adding another story or putting in pools and thinking it's going to enhance the sale price and give you a capital gain, I would say no to so many people not to do that. I remember when we sold homes, going back, when there was an extension, the extensions are so much better nowadays, but there are still some extensions that look like extensions. And instead of being a 4-bedroom home, it was always a 3-bedroom home with a 4th bedroom extension. That's how people saw it all of the time. There was a situation in some of the councils in the West where there are a lot of new Australian families. I can say this because my parents were one of the people who lived in these areas, and they used to call it the extra room. I just don't want to offend the Lebanese culture because I am from my parents are of Lebanese background, but they would call it the 3-bed with a leb room.
What's that?
Oh, it's true. It was the extra patio that was built without council approval.
Yeah.
And what happened eventually was that the councils passed all of it and changed the legislation so they could get it all approved and all settle down and start again. And it was a big thing. I remember going to so many of my relatives' homes. My mum and dad would take me, and there'd be that extra room out the back that just appeared. And mum and dad had one as well.
Along with the concrete front yard.
Concrete. Oh, that's the Italians, but we had the concrete backyard.
Right.
With the pink flamingos out front. Why is it that pools kind of seem to polarise people? I love pools. Most Australians love water, but your theme of possibly over-capitalising with the pool is pretty common, isn't it? Why is that?
It is because it really doesn't add value to a property. In many cases, again, it's like that house, it's a burden. The pool becomes a burden. If people are buying investment properties and they say to me, I found this investment property, it's great, it's got a pool, I said, don't go near it. I would never buy an investment property with a pool in it because the issues and the problems you have with that, because it's not the tenant's pool. And, they don't have a responsibility to look after it the same way you might living there. And it just becomes a burden. So from an investment perspective, I would never buy a property with a pool.
What about things like, if you've got a dated kitchen, for example, and you spend 20 grand on putting a new kitchen in, is that going to add value?
Yes, I think refurbishment can. Refurbishment can add value to a property, most certainly. In fact, I'm talking to a lady tonight on Sky Business who has a business called Refurb to Sell. And she specifically finds properties, they get them valued, they look at what the price might be, they then look at what it might cost to do a renovation on it, and then they value it after the renovation is done, and they're finding that they're getting a significant upside because it's like a lot of the shows that you see. It's like a lot of the shows you see on TV in
the
respect
block
to where they renovate.
Thing.
Yes. I think that's good. But when you start expanding, extending, swimming pools, all those sorts of things, you are not going to get your money back. So it should be there for you to enjoy.
Are there some absolutes that need to be right in a house if you're selling, like, for example, new kitchen, new bathroom, new coat of paint, new flooring?
Yeah.
Are there things like that that are just a given that you have to have right and looking good?
A kitchen always sells. A great bathroom always sells. One of the things that people don't notice, if you ever really want to go deep down into buying a property, this is going to sound strange, and Johnny, you need to listen to this, our panel operator tonight. When you are looking at a property, one of the things you need to do, John, is to go into the bathroom, go into the toilet, put the toilet seat down, if it's a separate toilet, and sit on the toilet seat and have a look at the door frame in front of you, because the door frame in front of you will tell you how well constructed the property is, because it's so enclosed in a room you can actually see if the property's moved or it's warped just in that one little area.
Wow.
And that's a great tester to find out what a property's settled like on a block of land.
Wow, that's
Charles
interesting.
Tarbey wisdom. Sit on the toilet seat
And
and
of course,
look straight ahead.
at the same time, John, if you feel like it,
While you're there.
while you're there.
Beautiful.
I'm not
Coming
allowed
up.
to anymore. They make it hard for the use conveniences now at open house inspections. In the old days, I was
That's
quite
right.
keen on checking it all out, make sure the plumbing works. You can't
Yes.
anymore.
No.
That's a guy thing, though. That's a
Is
you
it?
know, yeah, that's
Oh,
a marking your territory
You think it's
thing.
a territorial
It
thing,
is.
don't you?
You don't
There's
go
always
and-
a garden on the way out, Nick.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed, mate. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey here tonight. Property Fast Track. Lots ahead. We'll go around the grounds and, as we said, take a look at what happens in Broken Hill. I really like Broken Hill. It's a fascinating town. Might not be for all investors, but we'll take a look and see whether it's worth plonking some money in there. And also Tom Panos. He is a super auctioneer. We'll take a look at what transpired over the weekend. There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Property Fast Track tonight and talking lifestyles. Have your say to win 10Ks on. Get on the radio tonight. Win $10,000 in a couple of weeks' time.
Now, talk to a first home buyer struggling to enter the market, and they might admit to you that they secretly pray for the property market to crash and for prices to come tumbling down. You can understand where they're coming from, but be careful what you wish for. A market crash would be a terrible thing for everybody, including first home buyers, according to Nerida Conisbee. She's a leading property expert.
Yep, and the chief economist at realestate.com.au. Evening, Nerida.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thanks for joining us. Now, you must have heard this a bunch of times from younger first-time buyers.
Yeah,
What's the reality?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of first-home buyers would love prices to come back a lot. I mean, a lot of upgraders, I think, would similarly like prices to reduce significantly. I think, though, the reality is that price crashes don't occur in isolation, and something pretty bad has to happen for it to happen. And typically, that means rising unemployment. And when we've got rising unemployment, people generally can't afford to either keep their homes or even buy homes.
So do we have conditions that are right for this to happen at the moment in Australia?
Not at the moment. I mean, we did see it happen in Perth, and not quite a property crash, but with jobs being lost in the mining sector, we did see prices come back a lot. Right now, Sydney and Melbourne are the powerhouse economies of Australia, and that's really fueling house price growth.
I guess when you look at international events like what is happening in North Korea, that's destabilised markets in the US, stock markets, and something like that could have a negative impact on all markets around the world, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, anything negative happening politically can have a very large negative impact. The share market, though, is interesting, and one of the things that happens when share markets crash is that a lot of people go into property because property does have that solidity, I guess, about it, and people like the fact that they can own bricks and mortar. So, a lot of this instability is pushing people into property, not just residential, but also commercial property as well.
Nerida, it's Charles. Good to hear your voice again. The US figure, but we were talking about the US a little earlier on, and we were talking about that crash, and we were talking about how people were borrowing money hand over fist, and that crash happened unbelievably 2008. So it's almost been 10 years. From your point of view with the GFC, do you think prices have fully recovered in that period of time?
Yeah, look, they have. I mean, 10 years ago, only just so. I mean, it took 10 years for prices to recover. And I'd say that some areas prices probably still haven't recovered. I mean, there's quite a difference when you look at some Midwest locations in the US and compare it to places like New York or San Francisco. But look, it took a long time. I mean, the price growth that happened leading up to the GFC was significant. And once people couldn't get finance or refinance their loans, it just had such a huge and terrible impact on that market.
Nerida, it would seem that there's a bit of a correction going on in some of the markets in Australia. Some say they've peaked out, now we're on a plateau. So how do banks react in that situation?
Look, banks, it is interesting. I mean, a lot of the growth has been pushed up by banks lending a lot. So, I think we do have to acknowledge that the growth in debt that we've taken on has led to a lot of this price growth. Banks do rely heavily on lending to people buying homes. So, it has been such a big growth area. And as that slows, it means lower profits for them. So, I think there's a couple of things here. There's a lot around financial stability and ensuring that we don't borrow too much and we don't put ourselves under so much pressure that we can't pay off loans. But there's also banking profits, and, those two things don't always match up.
Apart from inheriting money, what else should first home buyers be wishing for, Nerida?
Look, I think the thing is that not everywhere is expensive. That, if you go to a market like Sydney, it is unaffordable for houses and apartments. And if we go to Melbourne, for example, Melbourne's unaffordable for houses, but apartments now are quite cheap because there's been so much development. I think the thing is, though, is to have a look around, make sure that you understand that your first home is probably not your forever home, and buying something that may not be your ideal is a good idea. Just to get into the market, start paying off your home, really makes a lot of sense. I think also, though, the fact that buying your own home still remains a really good idea. That at the moment, if you get to retirement and you don't own a property or own a significant proportion of a property, trying to live off off your superannuation or your pension can be quite difficult. So, I think just understanding all those things is really important as a first home buyer.
Nerida, thanks for your time. Some good insights into the property market, what it may and may not do. It's a bit of an unpredictable beast at times, isn't it?
That's right, it sure is.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Property Fast Track tonight. Nick Bennett, Kayley Harris and Charles Tarbey here taking your calls. 13 12 83 is our number. After
the break, we're going to have a look around the grounds and we'll look at Merrylands in New South Wales and also Broken Hill.
Have your say to win $10,000. That's right, $10,000 up for grabs early October in the John and Gary Breakfast Show. Get in the draw by getting on the radio tonight, 13 12 83. As we go around the grounds, thanks to Century 21's extensive national network of real estate agents, it's always very insightful to have a look at a snapshot of a particular area and find out, with the help of those on the ground, boots on the ground today. Rafi Younes from C21 at Merrylands in New South Wales is on board. G'day, Rafi.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Very well, Rafi. It's Charles. If you don't mind if I tell people just a little bit about you.
Yes, by all means.
It's all good. Rafi is a refugee from Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And he came here and he's made an incredible success of himself. Not only was he welcomed into Australia, but he served in the Australian Army for a couple of years to thank Australia for allowing him to come here, which is a fantastic
good
story.
On you, Rafi.
And now he has an incredible business in the Merrylands district, and is approached by all kinds of individuals, developers alike, because of his success. So there you go, Rafi. There's your big rap tonight, mate.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it as usual.
Tell us about Merrylands. It's an older suburb of Sydney, Rafi. Tell us what's there and why do you like it?
Merrylands is one of the jewels of Western Sydney, and it has seen a strong price growth in the residential real estate in the recent years. And more people move into the area to be close to fast and efficient transport links, local employment and retail. There is a new project starting by Merrylands Stockland. The project is taking place on mid-2018. They are building over 500 apartments, over 5 towers between 11 to 17 a story, which the new Cumberland Council that's being merged between Parramatta, Auburn and Holroyd. So this is the first project that the Stockland's taken over. Also, the retail component of the new development will deliver an additional 8,000 square metre of retail to the city centres. So the dynamic of the area has been changed for the last couple of years that I'm operating in the area. Majority of all the homes now, a lot of builders and developers are purchasing For the last 2 years, the area is being rezoned to the high-rise up to 17 stories. Most of the people from the North Shore area has been coming in and investing in Merrylands. They're buying a lot of the old blocks, average, knockdown homes around $1 million. They rebuild them to duplexes and sell them to the investors and the first-time buyers.
And Rafi, how do you think the landscape's going to change the social makeup, at least when these new 500 apartments come online?
At the moment, there's a fair bit of stock on the market, where 3 years ago there was 1.4% shortage of the properties in the area. But at the moment, big developers start to construct. There's a couple of new towers that's on the market where basically 12-story high, and they have a pool on the top floor. It's like a very modern apartments getting built in the area, almost competing with the units in a city wise. So there is a bit of risk at the moment, especially this year. It's being oversupplied in terms of units. So majority of the people are sort of worried if they do buy more units because of the Stocklands, building and etc. So there might be a price decrease, and also there's a risk to the bank. So anybody that wants to purchase property in Merrylands, they have to have 20% deposit and a stamp duty, otherwise the banks refuse to lend at the moment.
Well, Rafi, you're one of the few agents that are talking this way now, and I'm really pleased to hear you are, because the market has changed, and I'd like to think people start to accept that change. Rafi, you've been fantastic as always. You always know what you're talking about there, and I'm very proud to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Charles. I really appreciate it for the opportunity.
Rafi Younes from Century 21 at Merrylands. So that's probably round about, I'm guessing, 12, 15 Ks off the coast. Now let's go way out west, about 1,000 kilometres off the coast. You went a long way away then, didn't you? One of my favourite spots, Broken Hill, Century 21's Matthew Handberg. G'day there, Matthew. How are you going?
I'm well, thank you, Charles. How are you?
Good, very, very good. Matthew, we wanted to try something different tonight by going from right across the east all the way across, well, not all the way to the west, but certainly a long way away from what you hear about with the action in the Sydney, Melbourne markets, etc. Your marketplace is incredibly unusual but incredibly strong. So tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, just hearing Raf then talking about first homeowners paying $1 million, where our average purchase price at the minute is about $105,000. So it's a very different market.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
What we're finding out here, Charles, is that we're getting particularly people from the major cities that, average incomes that are just sort of really struggling, I suppose, to pay those, what I believe are top dollars, of course, in comparison to our market, approaching us because we've got such low purchase price. The return on investment at the moment is averaging about 12% growth.
My God.
Wow.
Well, Matthew, two things that are really important in terms of getting people to move into an area, and that's jobs. So talk to me about that. Also lifestyle.
Yeah, the job side of things has actually been improving quite substantially. The main mining company, with Broken Hill obviously where BHP originated, the main company out here, Australia, has said that their main mine's going to be existing to at least 2030. And there's the biggest iron ore deposit in Australia is about 60 k's outside of town. So that isn't up and running as yet. They're talking about starting some construction next year. So myself at the age of 29, if that kicks in and starts construction, they're talking a minimum of a 50-year lifespan. So that'll see my working career out and will make a very big difference to the Broken Hill town.
Matthew, something on my bucket list is the Broken Heel Festival, and I understand it's coming up shortly?
It was just, actually this weekend just gone.
Oh, I missed it. No way.
It was fantastic. Broken Hill was absolutely buzzing. They had thousands of extra people here. Every accommodation was packed out, staying at people's properties. And it was fantastic, not only to have the extra people around, but people really enjoying themselves. And it's a great draw card. They even had a specially organised train to come all the way from Sydney to bring extra people over.
Wow.
Oh.
Matthew, I mentioned lifestyle before because a lot of times when you think about Broken Hill, you think it's in the outback, there's nothing out there. Tell us more, tell us the real story.
Well, Charles, we're 50 kilometres from the South Australian border, but we're in New South Wales. And being such an old settlement, early 1800s, the infrastructure that we've got here is, for my belief anyway, as a local, is quite significant. We've got a very good hospital. They're expanding some more health buildings. They're spending $30 million out here on some new admin blocks. And we have very good transport to all the Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide. So, we're connected via Regional Express. We've obviously got bus services.
Now, Matthew, I was asking you about golf courses and restaurants, don't you? Where?
What I was going to, thanks for butting in, Charles. But anyway, no. What it is great is, it takes 4 or 5 minutes to get anywhere, and with a population of about 19,000, it's so easy living, particularly for those people just on an average income. You can obviously live quite well. We've got the good main strip, with the good shops. Yes, we do have a fantastic golf course. Probably doesn't quite rival yours, but it is still pretty good. And, it is a very good place to live.
Fantastic.
And look, that's interesting you say about the growth and commitment with the mining companies, but a lot of folks are a bit shy of mining towns because they argue they're a one-speed economy, but pretty clearly Broken Hill doesn't have that. You've got a good tourism industry, and a little further out at, say, Menindee Lakes, they're growing a lot of table grapes, aren't they?
They do, yes. But I think they're now pretty much at the stage that the health employees is the biggest employer out here. So what we actually find, and this is why the rental yield is so high, is that we have a lot of professional people, particularly starting their career, police, nurses, doctors, AMBOs, moving from Sydney when they finish their studies or maybe their regional component of their job. And they'll spend 3 years, 5 years out here. So you always have that steady flow of tenants. And, it's not 100% mining dependent like it used to be, which puts a lot more stability within our market. Most deposits out here at the moment are only 10% required, where I heard that Merrylands was at 20. So there's obviously some confidence from the lenders out there that, the region's in a pretty good time at the moment.
Go and cut your teeth in Broken Hill. If you know my cousin Zita Bennett, say good day to her. I know she's a rival agent in town. Matthew Handberg, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks,
Cheers,
have
mate.
a lovely night. Cheers.
Fascinating place, Broken Hill. I love it.
Yeah.
I like art. Pro Hart. He's gone now. He grew up, did all of his work around Broken Hill. In fact, there's a street in Broken Hill dedicated to not just the creativity of Pro Hart, but his extended family.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of houses that have been converted into, art galleries, really. And his children are also very artistic as well.
And isn't Silverton is not too far from Broken Hill?
That's right.
There's a really good pub in Silverton, apparently.
Yeah, that's right. That's where
That's what I was getting at. Now,
the first Mad Max movie was made
There you
there.
go.
There's a pub there that kind of has a tribute to the Max.
Yeah. Coming up after the break, we're going to check in with Tom Panos, auctioneer, for an auction wrap.
Have you say to win 10K, and as we learnt before from Matthew Handberg at C21 Broken Hill, if you win $10,000, that is enough for a deposit to buy a home in Broken Hill.
Yep. You couldn't say that about too many other places in the
You
country,
couldn't.
could
Have a
you?
great 12% return. I'm blown away by that.
Yeah. Big figures.
13, 12, 83.
Normally around 5%, isn't it, Charles?
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah.
Okay. Monday night, time to chat with Tom Panos about auctions. He's an auctioneer, obviously, and a 2-decade veteran of the business. Tom knows what's going on, and he joins us again on Property Fast Track. How you doing?
Hi, Kayley. Hi, guys.
G'day,
Tom.
mate. Let's start out with Melbourne, Tom. Another strong weekend, but fewer bidders were participating than in previous weeks. What have you noticed about that? Less folks at open homes, inspections and auctions?
Yeah, so Melbourne, I'm looking here, 71.3%. So we're down. It's still leading. It's still leading the race, apart from the small sample size we got in Hobart. But I think, look, 71 is still a strong number. But I think what we're seeing in Melbourne is that extra stock. They nearly had 1,000 auctions on the weekend, and they'll have some big numbers coming up because come the AFL Grand Final, they bunch all their stock right before the AFL Grand Final. So I think that you'll probably find that number may actually not go up too much. And I'm not trying to be a smarty, but if you listen back to the program about 2 months ago, I said that the clearance rate would be mid-60s by mid-September in Sydney and probably around national. And I'm actually having a look. Sydney 65.5, and national weighted average is 66%.
Well, Tom, credit where due. Well done, I say.
I'm going to battle with Tom on this one because I think Sydney's doing pretty well when you look at some of the major suburbs. Tom, it's not as bad as it used to be. You're an auction man. You've been there when they were 45 and 50, so you must be going to church every Sunday at the moment.
Look, there's a number of candles I light up, and but look, you're right, Charles. You're right, because let's be clear, 65% does not look good compared to 85, but it looks a lot better than 45s, which was what we had for various times. They used to run for 8-9 years at a time. But I think that this is a wake-up call to every vendor on the market that thinks that the party is still going, that they need to accept the reality of the marketplace. And the reality of the marketplace is they probably won't get $900,000 for their house. It's only worth, $850,000, $820,000 now. The one that they're going to buy, they're probably going to save $80,000 because those owners have sold. So I think what we're seeing is a marketplace that doesn't change if you're buying and selling in the same marketplace, because you're selling cheaper, but you're buying cheaper.
Tom, let's talk about some new laws. The Victorian government has new quoting laws for auction properties. Yeah. What do you know about these? What can you tell us?
Well, what they need to be doing is real estate agents need to more or less tell, my understanding of the legislation in Victoria is that they're no longer going to tolerate a real estate agent that's going to tell buyers that they can buy a property for $1 million when the owners are really hoping to get 1.2. So what they're doing is saying, listen, stop trying to deceive buyers and getting buyers to go get pest inspections and building inspections and going along to an auction, missing out because the owner wanted a lot more. Bring some transparency and let people walk in and have a reasonable idea of what it is that's going to, buy the property at, or don't quote a figure at all.
Look, I support that, but you're kind of almost asking, aren't you, the vendor to reveal, if you like, the reserve.
Yeah, well, look, the issue is, the reserve is interesting because if you actually ask the reserve of a vendor on the day they list a property and the reserve of the day of the auction, which is about 5 weeks apart, the reserve changes, and it changes based on, feedback that is coming back from the market and is being conveyed from the buyers to the agent and, in turn, the agent to the vendor. So I just like the concept of being able to tell buyers that here's the range that we're talking this week. Now, if you find the following week that you're not getting interest, you've got every right to adjust that vendor expectation, speak to the vendor and say, listen, we don't have people interested at that figure. We need to readjust it, and then to go back to the market and say, look, this is the new level that we're aiming at. So I think that's what people like.
Just quickly, I'll jump in, Kayley, and then you go for something. I think that it's cut to a point. Pest and building reports ought to be included, because it's very hard to estimate,
Yeah.
And we've all kind of got used to the fact that estate agents will say they try their best to kind of land at 10% above or below the vendor's estimated sale price. Yeah. But if you just give people pest and building reports, then everyone's comfortable, not dumping $500 or $1,000 as they kick the tyres every time.
It does. It happens a lot, and this is one of the biggest problems associated with if 10 people are looking at it bidding on that property. There's a lot of money spent, and there should be a pest report and there should be a building report.
There was a move to do this a couple of years ago, wasn't there? There should be one pest and building report for the property, because the only people that are winning out of that is the pest and building reporters.
That's true.
They're making
they
a
have
fortune.
An expiry date as well,
Yeah.
so that's another thing. If a property's on the market for longer than it should be, you're back where you started again.
Yeah. That doesn't make sense to me. Yeah.
No, there's real estate agents now that have got that service in place where they'll actually say, we've got a pest inspection and a building inspection, and it's provided there. They'll even have it online on the property, and what will happen is, if you're the successful bidder, you then go off and you purchase a more extensive report. So in many ways, it's a summarised version of the report. But that is a very, very good point. I think one of the concerns that a buyer sometimes has is that I'd rather trust my builder than the builder that you're providing me. But I think at the end of the day, I think if you're a builder that's got ethics and you are governed by the laws of having your licence, that you're actually not going to be misquoting or deceiving in that report.
Yeah, exactly. Tom, thank you so much. Talk to you next week.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom Panos.
Bye-bye.
There.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? I've only ever been given one complimentary pest and building report, and I was really impressed by this mob. I thought, thanks for that. Saves me the hassle and the expense.
It does. You know, why should one pest inspection person inspect exactly the same property and get exactly the same amount of money 5 or 6 times over? That's just ridiculous.
Property Fast Track. Charles Tarbey, thank you so much. Later tonight with Tom Panos on Sky Business News.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. 6:02 at 9 o'clock.
Good stuff, mate.
Thank you.
Kaylee, you're back tomorrow.
I'll be back tomorrow.
This
See
has
you
got
then.
a vague real estate connection. Little House on the Prairie.
Yes.
Debuted on television today in 1974.
How much did that sell for?
Good point, eh?
Knock it down and
it'll
build
be a-
some units.